One of my hobby horses is that people often, when they talk about game design and gamification in healthcare, they spend a lot of time talking about points. You know, we'll just put some points in, maybe people earn some badges, and that is, I mean, that's bullshit, basically. I mean, we know this doesn't work, and no one wants to do that. It's like giving somebody a bicycle with the wheels bolted on instead of on a hub. I mean, it looks everything like a bicycle, but the wheels don't turn, you can't ride it. Making something look like a game is not making it a game. Right? Making points and badges are just the tip of the iceberg. You got to have the whole iceberg under the water to have a proper game. And this is one of the problems with these fitness trackers, is they don't really understand the fundamentals of human psychology in some really frustrating ways. So, you know, I get a Fitbit and I put it on. I'm like, I'm curious about it. How does this thing work? Right? There's some uncertainty about how it's going to work. There's something to be discovered. It's got some discoverability. Well, what do you do when that's gone? When I realized, well, every time I take a step, the number increments, well, I figured this thing out, you know, in the drawer, right? I mean, let's understand about how human brains work. You need to have a sense of agency to make real decisions. You need to have some true conflict or some challenge to overcome. You need some real uncertainty. You need some discoverability, something you can master. And then, and only then, do you get outcomes that can be observed and measured. Only then can you get to points and badges and achievements after you've done that other stuff. And it just seems so obvious to me when I look at Fuel Band and I look at Fitbit, and I just think, you guys, you're supposed to be guys sitting in your basements playing video games all the time. Have you learned nothing?
There's three steps really the world's going through. One is data collection. I've read that 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years, and this is going to happen again and again. In healthcare, we're now digitizing all the file cabinets, and we're collecting data that we've never had before, how many steps you took. So that's fantastic. Once you have data, then you say, I might want to show it to someone. So then the next phase is sharing the data. The third phase, which we really haven't entered into almost as a society, because think Google, data collection, think Facebook, data sharing. Can you think of a great, how do we meaningfully use it and really change, you know, what's happening? I mean, there certainly are examples, but not to that degree. Like Watson at IBM is, you know, trying to go that direction. In healthcare, you know, if you're familiar with meaningful use, which is the government's legislation to pay you for putting in electronic medical records, 2 years ago you had to begin to collect the data. Now you have to share the data. They haven't asked them to actually meaningfully use it yet, so it's not even here. You shouldn't expect it in healthcare. But it's coming. There's a need for intrinsic feedback loops, not extrinsic feedback loops. And if you think about kind of the current paradigm of say, managing diabetes, it's really, can you record the data, collect the data in a logbook every day for 90 days? We won't give you any feedback at all or any positive, you know, reinforcement. Then you'll see your doctor, and maybe like 30% of the time, you'll get some positive reinforcement and something productive. So if we can turn that on its head and say, every single time you put something in, you will get something back out.
We have to remember, at the end of the day, we're managing people, not managing data.
So some of the people are only stepping on the scale every day. Some of the people are stepping on the scale and have a fitness tracker device. And so then they follow them and say, well, who lost more weight? It was the people that only stepped on the scale. And then luckily they actually did the qualitative surveys to find out what was going on. And the people that had the fitness tracker, they were getting a reinforcement like, hey, I'm doing stuff. You know, like I exercised, and the people on the scale, all they saw was the negative, you know, you haven't gotten there yet, try harder.
I think that one thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of bad psychology everywhere, and data is not going to solve it. In emergency rooms in Ontario, they had a problem that the homeless would come into the emergency rooms in big numbers, which obviously is a nuisance. The obvious interpretation was, you know, Ontario, it's cold, you're homeless, you get a cup of tea, you're going to come a lot, and we have to stop it. So they were kind of being less nice to the homeless, and then somebody did a study, Redelmeyer and his colleagues, where they did it by, you know, randomly experimental design, all nicely done. Half were allocated to the standard treatment, and the other half to a compassionate treatment, where we actually treated extremely nicely. Somebody spent time with you, made sure that you got all the attention you needed, etc. And the compassionate treatment people were significantly less likely to come back to that or any other hospital in Ontario. And the finding was that when you're homeless, you're feeling bad, your knee hurts. you know, the emergency room, I don't know if you've been to one recently, is not worth a cup of tea. But if you feel like they haven't taken care of you, you come back, or you come to the next hospital. If they convince you they've done the best you can for you, you're not interested in coming back. And so there's a whole policy designed around a bad psychology, and the more data you collected, the more misled you'd be. And so that's something to keep in mind as we interpret the data and what we know about it, and do, you know, very carefully designed pilot tests to see if we have the right story.